Was the Apostle Paul a rabbi? Well, I'll give you a good Jewish answer. Yes and no. Now, before discussing how Paul was and wasn't a rabbi, let's pause and talk a bit about the term rabbi. First, in Hebrew, the basic meaning of the term rabbi is teacher. Now, in Paul's day, which was in the first century, the word rabbi was not yet a technical term representing a formal office. Actually, the term rabbi was not used much in Jewish sources until the second century, beginning with the Mishnah. Interestingly, and I would say even ironically, the New Testament Gospels are our richest source for the earliest use of the term rabbi. The Gospels use the term rabbi about 15 times, specifically in reference to both Jesus and John the Baptist. Now later, in the second century, the term rabbi surfaced more in Jewish sources and continued to develop into a title that designated a person qualified to advise on matters of Jewish law and practice. So was Paul a rabbi? Well, even though our sources don't refer to him as a rabbi, Paul did function within the range of how that term was used in the first century. Now, some interpreters highlight details in Acts 22 and 23 to support that Paul was a rabbi because he identifies as a Christ-following Pharisee and mentions that he was educated by the famous Jewish sage Gamaliel. So these details in Acts do substantiate that Paul was an educated and faithful Jew through and through, but he's not presented as a rabbi. However, considering that Paul was an authoritative Jewish teacher who used the Torah to teach Christ-following Gentiles how to honor the God of Israel, I think it's fair to think of Paul as a rabbi. But we do need to nuance this a little bit and exercise some caution. It's not unusual for interpreters to project the functions and knowledge of later rabbis back onto Paul. Paul was not a Talmudic scholar, and he was not thoroughly versed in the mysticism that later characterized Jewish sources. Paul lived in a period we can think of as pre-rabbinic and pre-Talmudic. Ideas that eventually landed in later Jewish sources were likely circulating in Paul's day. However, assuming that Paul was an expert in the finer points of later Jewish sources is unlikely. Paul was certainly a gifted and highly influential teacher, but it would be some time before most Jewish teachers like Paul were widely honored with the formal title, rabbi. If you'd like to learn more about Paul and his Jewish and Greco-Roman context, check out my book, The Weird Apostle. You can find it on Amazon, and don't miss out on any of my new content by subscribing wherever you're watching or listening.